I'm gonna hide this tape when I'm finished. If none of us make it, at least there'll be some kind of record. The storm's been hitting us hard now for 48 hours. We still have nothing to go on. One other thing. I think it rips through your clothes when it takes you over. Windows found some shredded long johns, but the name tag was missing. They could be anybody's. Nobody trusts anybody now. We're all very tired.
1982 saw the release of one of the greatest horror films ever made, delivering nearly 2 hours of paranoia, claustrophobia, and intense body horror. The post-Halloween John Carpenter is on top form here, delivering what many agree is a true sci-fi horror masterpiece. Though the amazing practical effects alone are enough to include The Thing on any genre-defining list, the film's tight, precisely shot, no-nonsense direction, along with the stellar performances from the cast, allow The Thing to work on a level only reserved for the best in horror. Other examples from this pretty elite list being The Shining or The Exorcist, and maybe a handful more. It's a level of horror artistry that's rarely achieved, particularly in more recent decades, and it makes for some incredibly enjoyable, if not intense, viewing. If you haven't seen The Thing, then turn off this review and go and watch it immediately. But if you have, then it's time for a quick story recap. We're introduced to a group of men consisting of scientists, pilots, cooks, radio operators who are all working and living in a secluded Arctic research station. Isolated from the outside world, the group find it rather odd when a new dog appears to be approaching the camp. A dog that's been chased and shot at by some very freaked out Norwegians in a helicopter. After dispatching the seemingly crazy Norwegians and taking in the dog, a party is sent to check out the Norwegian base, only to find nothing but dead bodies and a burned, mutated humanoid corpse. The group decides to bring back the latter so it can be autopsied, which turns out to be a pretty bad idea. At this point, life for the isolated men starts to get very weird. It turns out that the dog was not what it seemed. The charred remains were not actually dead, and that something is now in their midst, and this thing can copy and assimilate any living creature at once. It's not long before any sense of safety or trust completely dissipates within the camp, and what's left is a slowly diminishing group of scared, tired, and paranoid men trying to figure out who's human, who isn't, and what the hell they're going to do. It really is quite the predicament. The film is technically a remake of The Thing from Another World from 1951, which in turn was adapted from John W. Campbell's novella Who Goes There? But in no way does this film feel like a retread or any kind of remake, certainly not in the way we've become used to in today's somewhat creatively bankrupt movie landscape. This film is very much the definitive version of this story, and along with The Fly, is often used as people's go-to example of a genuinely great remake that's better than the original. Personally, I'd also put 1988's The Blob on that list too. As a junior partner, sure, but I still love it. Anyway, that's for another video. There are just so many great filmmaking decisions in The Thing that it's hard to know where to begin. Kurt Russell gives a great performance as MacReady, and really emerges as the main protagonist as the film progresses, despite only being the camp's pilot and just one of the ensemble initially. This was Russell's third collaboration with Carpenter, and you can see why Carpenter loves casting this guy. He's so effortlessly cool.
She's a bitch.
But equally, he plays each scene with genuine grit and emotion. The other characters, such as Blair, Childs, Windows, as well as the rest too, work very well together and most importantly feel believable. They aren't actually the most fleshed out bunch ever committed to celluloid, but it doesn't actually matter. We know everything we need to know, and it's more about their interaction and reaction to the situation they find themselves in. Apparently during the making of the film, the actors themselves didn't know who was or wasn't a thing in order to keep up the suspense and mystery on set, a move that clearly paid off and ended up all over the screen. Good move, Carpenter. It's also never made clear to the audience who exactly Patient Zero is, as during the scene in which we see the dog enter the living quarters, it's not clear whose shadow is being cast on the wall. Carpenter purposely used non-cast member Dick Warlock, who was the stunt coordinator, so the audience weren't able to identify who it was, again in order to ensure the mystery of it, though of course there are plenty of theories on this. This ambiguity is brilliantly set up and is the beginning of the loss of trust that's so pivotal to the film working as well as it does. Other aspects of the film that are firing on all cylinders are Rob Bottin's creature effects that, with a little help from Stan Winston, are truly unbelievable and are a large part of the film's appeal. They are still the gold standard for practical effects, and along with the transformation scene in American Werewolf in London, there will probably always be the high watermark in creature effects, particularly within the horror genre. It's criminal and very tone deaf of the Academy to not nominate them for any awards that year. They still hold up incredibly well and create a look, feel, and visceral grossness that CGI couldn't hope to replicate in its wildest dreams. The four main gross-out scenes, which could be broken down to the dogs, the arm chop, the spider head, the blood test, are so memorable and so pivotal to the film that if they hadn't worked, the film would have collapsed under the weight of their failure, thus their success really can't be overstated. Drew Struzan's artwork for the film is a classic too. Though the scene depicted in the poster never actually occurs in the film, it doesn't really matter. The poster is more about recreating the feeling the film gives you, and aside from that, it's just a really cool and iconic piece of artwork. Perfect bedroom poster or t-shirt material too. In terms of the music, Morricone provides the score here, in collaboration with Carpenter. The simple, pulsing theme fits the on-screen images like a glove, and is a vital component in itself. Hearing the score solo and out of context will pull you right back into the film's atmosphere. And though it's certainly no rousing John Williams orchestral wonder, it does its job equally well, and holds its own against any other film theme from the era in terms of its desired effect. Interestingly, many of the unused themes from The Thing were reused for Tarantino's Hateful Eight, another film about a group of people trapped in close quarters with little trust for each other. Throughout the film, Carpenter manages to breed one of the most intense, there's nowhere to escape to atmospheres this side of Alien. In fact, I'd say it's done even more effectively. You can say goodbye to trust and to any form of solace when immersed in this film, as it can have quite the effect on the viewer if you allow it to. And that's what the film ultimately boils down to. Paranoia, the loss of trust, the inability to escape a situation, and the results are almost palpable. It's hard to express this exactly to people who haven't seen the film, but I think Quentin Tarantino does a rather good job.
I don't get scared in movies. The Thing I got scared in, and I was scared, and it made me want to put it under a microscope about why I was actually frightened during that movie. And I think the reason is this. One or more of them are possibly this thing that's going to devour all of them. And no one knows if you are the guy I've known forever or if you're a thing.
Right.
And the movie makes the paranoia of that so palpable, so real. It's almost like another character in the movie, just the sheer paranoia of
exactly.
it. But they're trapped in this shelter. And so the paranoia is bouncing off of the four walls, bouncing, the fear of the paranoia, bouncing, until it has nowhere to go except through the fourth wall into the audience. And I started feeling exactly like they felt.
Which I think is an enormous indicator of great art, is if it changes how you feel about how you look at the art.
Absolutely.
Though it might seem crazy to us now, during its release back in 1982, The Thing was subject to bad box office and even worse reviews. People clearly weren't ready for it, but great artists are often ahead of their time, finding their deserved appreciation only in retrospect, and unfortunately for Carpenter, that's exactly what happened here. Some reviews called it the quintessential moron movie of the 80s, and bereft, despairing, and nihilistic, lacking in feeling and meaning. And of course, who could forget? Instant junk! To me, however, this only goes to show how full of it and how out of touch professional critics can be. Talk about not having your finger on the pulse. Luckily though, the film did manage to find its audience on home video and, as stated, it was slowly but surely reappraised and given its due. Basically, mainstream culture had to catch up with the film, and though it couldn't have been much fun for Carpenter at the time, it must feel good now to prove the naysayers so wrong, and to show just how off the mark they were. The summer of '82 was also the summer of E.T., a film that was inescapable at the time and did manage to really touch a nerve with people en masse. Friendly, cute and hopeful aliens were clearly the order of the day, not grotesque assimilating shapeshifters, so it's pretty undeniable that this will have affected The Thing's box office success significantly. I've got nothing negative to say about Spielberg, as I am a big fan, but if it came down to E.T. versus The Thing, I know which film I'd choose. Come to think of it, that'd be a pretty amazing crossover movie. Many have said that The Thing deals in multiple subtext, whether it's actually commenting on the loss of trust in modern communities, or the potential of mutually assured destruction, which was at its height in the Cold War 80s, and even the emerging AIDS epidemic of the era. Who's infected, and why, what are the effects, how is it passed on, etc., and more. Any of these could be correct, or maybe The Thing is just a really well-made monster movie. But I think what's more significant is the fact that people are discussing the film to this degree and on this level, injecting further meaning and significance into the text. This just communicates to us that the film, though a little delayed perhaps, did eventually touch a nerve with people and resonate with them to a very significant degree. The ambiguous ending also contributes to the further discussion of the film, as it's not tied up with a neat little bow for us in the way many films are. Did they win? Is Childs or McCready the thing? Are they both? Or neither? Who knows? But the fact that this is left open-ended deepens the film somehow and leaves us wanting more, and yet rightly, we don't get it. Just as we are never told exactly who or what the thing is, what it wants, where it comes from, the ending leaves us with plenty to think about and plenty to discuss, as any great film should. After more than 40 years, The Thing is still not for the faint-hearted. Every different element of the film has allowed it to endure in the way it has, and guaranteed it a high-ranking spot in the eternal horror pantheon. It's an ice-cold classic and feels like the style of filmmaking that just couldn't be, pardon the pun, replicated today. What a film. Being tied to a sofa will never feel the same again.